Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today, I'm trying to map Carl Jung's ideas into this diagram that we've been working on. Even if you're not familiar with the diagram, that's all right. I'm going to give a quick summary of it. The link to the detailed description is there. The video describing it is there on the meetup page. Carl Jung, I love Carl Jung, and he has been a major influence on me. And I thought that I could do it that I would be able to handle it, but it's going to be very, very hard. So I'm going to do it in multiple steps. Originally, the plan was to focus on three ideas of Carl Jung in this particular order. His idea of self and individuation, that's number one. Number two, his ideas on archetypes. And number three was psychological functions. I ended up reading, for preparation for this meetup, my favorite writing by Carl Jung, which I think is by far his best and shortest. It's called The 7 Sermons to the Dead. And I'm going to talk extensively about that because it connects very well to what we are trying to do with all our meetups and this diagram. So first, I'm going to talk about the idea of self and the ideas contained in 7 Sermon to the Dead, because those are the most fundamental of Carl Jung's ideas, which shape everything else, all the other ideas. The second level, I'm going to talk about archetypes. And only third, we are going to go to psychological functions. Now, today we have till 9 o'clock because we have another meetup at 9 o'clock. If we can't finish, we will continue whatever is remaining, because I do want to go into great amount of detail on MBTI and psychological functions. But without these two contexts, it is really impoverished. It's like losing 90% of Carl Jung's thought in order to understand his thought on psychological functions. And that's not a good idea. So I am going to first hit those two ideas, his ideas about self, his ideas about archetypes, and then go into psychological functions. It's going to be interactive. So I'm going to start by, give me a second here. All right. So let's talk about Carl Jung first. Now we are trying to map his entire philosophy here. It's enormously difficult task. His work is very large and very deep. His insights are incredible. He's one of the great thinkers. So this is a very quick look at that. And I'll have to probably do follow-ups. All right. First thing I want to do is to use one of the greatest popularizers of Carl Jung's ideas, and that is Jordan Peterson. One of the fundamental things Jordan Peterson says in the book Maps of Meaning, and again in different forums, is that world can be looked at in two ways. One, as a place of things, or as a forum for action. So I'm going to use Carl Jung's ideas now to actually describe the diagram. Let me see, give me a second here. Looking at the world as the forum for action is looking at the world with this hexagon as the primary. Looking at the world as world of things is to look at these peripherals as primary. That you see that world is these things, these separate things, and you're trying to look at them. The modern approach focuses on this peripheral approach. The approach that we have been studying in the scribal period, whether it be Bhagavad Gita or Gospel of John or Tao Te Ching or Jung's core ideas, they are all about this, about looking at the world as a forum of action. Jordan Peterson says that that's what all of mythology does. That's what all of religion does. And it's profoundly true. So what I'm saying is that this way of looking at the world is foreign to the modern mind. So it's going to take some readjusting for most of us to actually get that. Now we have, at 52 Living Ideas, we have had the advantage of actually diving deep into Tao Te Ching, into Bhagavad Gita, and into Gospel of John, so that we have some idea of what it means. So that is what we're going to be, that is the distinction here. The Red Book of Carl Jung is the right place to start. Carl Jung repeatedly said that he developed the core of his ideas in the Red Book. And then rest of his career was simply explaining them, working them out. And what does the Red Book consist of? It consists of mandalas like this, which are diagrams which try to capture the whole. See, this is the core idea. It is all about the whole. You're trying to look at the whole, not parts. So never forget the whole is the principle of the scribal mode. This is kind of the scribal mode of functioning, looking at the world as forum of action. There are two movements we are capable of. There is a movement moving inward towards the center, which is integrating, which brings everything together, where there is this light and there is movement that actually integrates these things together on one hand, and they keep on getting closer and closer together. So that movement is an integrating movement towards the center. The second kind of movement is differentiation or anti-integration, that is taking you away from the center. Those are the two primary movements. Carl Jung's work is showing us that integration is fundamental. Differentiation happens within the context of integration. It is all about looking at it from another point of view of chaos and order. I don't like the terms chaos and order because those are states. What is really going on is that this movement inward is a movement of reordering, reintegrating. So you are either reintegrating or you're not. That is the difference between life and death. Let's talk about the story of Osiris. Osiris was a great king who built a great kingdom. This is the kingdom. This is basically the radiant hexagon that I'm drawing is your life. Is life as it exists now. It's your life. So he created this. He built a great civilization, great empire of Egypt. But he was getting old, was set in his ways. He had a brother called Seth, who's outside. Now, forget about these differences here between these various things. So we are not looking at circular movement, okay? We are looking only at radial movement. So focus only on the movement from the center out and from the outside in, just in the radial direction. That's all we are focused on in this entire discussion right now, in the first part of the discussion. So Scar wants to take the fruits of what Osiris has done. So this is like he has built a tree which is giving fruits, and it was being sustained by continuously going back to the center and producing new things. But he was getting old, so he was set in his ways, and he stopped doing that. He got stuck in his ways. He became blind to what was going on with his brother. And as a result, Seth killed him and took his parts and threw them all over in the periphery. Isis, which is the source of life, which was his queen, went out into the underworld in the periphery, got a part of him and impregnated herself to produce Osiris. So this part was used to create a new life out from here. Osiris, born of both creation and the full, part of the full manifestation, which Osiris's past was. He was son of both. He grew up, he killed Seth, and brought Osiris back from the dead. He collected these parts from the underworld and brought him back. And then the father and son gave one of his eyes to him. And father and son ruled Egypt. Okay, so this is a mythological story which captures the importance of being present, being focused, being aware, being focused on the center, the importance of continuous rejuvenation from the center. What we are doing with 52 living ideas, this entire diagram, is that we are looking at the scribal operation, which is the same as the mythological operation that Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung studied. It is about identifying virtue. It is asking the moral question, what is inward and what is outward? The inward is good. That means there is a continuous loop between this center here is the truth, goodness, beauty. Universal laws that operate. That is shaping in this outward movement. It is giving rise to parts of your life, and your life has to be focused on the center so you can continuously rejuvenate it and keep it responsive to life's requirement. Jordan Peterson talks about having one foot in order and one foot in chaos. Actually, that is where we stand. We stand at the precipice. We are beings who always have a choice in every moment. Are we going to drift? Drifting is this way. Or are we going to move towards the center? That is the heart. What we are doing at 52 Living Ideas is we are trying to recover this, whether in the writings of Jung, whether in the writings of Jung is much more accessible to us. He's a modern. But if you want to really get it, you have to look at Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Gospel of John. and try to see the common patterns to them. That's what we are doing. And what you find common is what we see here, that it is all about virtue of different kinds, virtue of pursuing wisdom to shape your mind, prudence in our dealings with the world, discipline in our action, love in our dealings with friends and family, devotion, bringing together all our feelings, and creation of beauty in all our expression or art. That is good. This going away from it is bad. So it's a moral view, which is the scribal view. Now, what we are doing here in this diagram is that we are acknowledging the scribal. We are identifying the nature of the scribal, but we are also identifying the nature of the periphery, what is in the modern. And we are trying to see the relationship between them and how to integrate the scribal into today's, so that we take scribal, like if we try to just look at scribal and say we have to be like that, that would be disastrous, because that is the same mistake as Osiris, holding on to something of the past. We have to take it and say, how do you use it today? And that's what this diagram is about. So this is a quick look at the fundamental. What I have looked at only right now is this axis between the center and the periphery. Next, I'm going to look at the concept of archetypes, which is a way of actually integrating this in the scribal era. This is another way of integrating it. This is the brilliance of Carl Jung. And then I'm going to look at this to give you a preview. These two axes, there are these two vertical, there is a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. Horizontal axis is the judgment axis that Carl Jung uses of thinking and feeling. The vertical axis is the perception axis that Carl Jung uses, sensing and intuition. But that we are going to go into later on. But my point here is that differentiation happens in the context of integration. If in trying to do differentiation, you miss the integration, you're actually hurting yourself. You think you have something, but what you have is actually hurtful to the wholeness of your being. Another way of approaching this using Carl Jung's ideas is that this entire diagram is the self. This includes your unconscious. It includes things that are produced which are not part of you yet. There are knowns, unknown unknowns. There is a life that you're using. And it's all about discovering, kind of increasing your awareness of everything that is going on, bringing into consciousness what is not conscious, and doing that relentlessly as a path of growth. So I want to go into details about how does individuation work using this diagram. Now, I'm just stunned by how much commonality is already there between what Carl Jung is saying and what we have been talking about. What I need to do is I need to step away in about 2-3 minutes to take a call. As soon as I come back, I'm going to do one more pass on this using Carl Jung's concepts, which are incredible. I was just completely blown away by it. In the 7 sermons from the dead, the first 3 of the sermons. Again, this point about the radial movement, because I want everybody to get this point about radial movement, that you really have the choice. The only power you really have is the power of attention, power of being aware. And there you have only, they have your fundamental choice. Are you going to focus on the center, the truth, the goodness, or not? It is very easy to drift. That requires no effort whatsoever. So that is the default for people. And that will take you away into the darkness. Whereas living requires continual focus, eternal vigilance, continuous awareness, relentless awareness. You can slip and you can go further up, and you always have the ability of turning back towards the center. So that is the heart of the issue. That is the heart of what the entire scribal tradition is talking about. You're saying, like Tao Te Ching says, act according to the Tao, follow the Tao. It's exactly the same statement. Bible says, focus on Jesus or focus on God. Have devotion to God. Bhagavad Gita says, live at the core of your being, act from the core of your being. All three are talking about the center. And that is the most important point, which is there in the core work of Jung. You can see that in Red Book. You can see it in his masterpiece, 7 Sermons to the Dead, in a crystal clear way. That is actually the underpinning of all his work. And if you don't get that, you don't get Jung. And whatever else you will get from him is going to be 10%, to put it charitably. Typically, it would be minus 10%. So this point we really need to get. So what I want to do now is I need to take a break for about 15 minutes. Joe is going to request people for questions and comments. Try to keep your comments brief. I will be back exactly at 7:45 Eastern time, and we will continue this. So I'm going to let people unmute themselves, and we will go ahead and go from there. Evanik and Joe will summarize the questions for me, and you're welcome, and we'll keep track of the names so you can give the points, but this is 15 minutes of kind of discussion on what was said so far. All right, Joe, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Shrikant. So everybody can actually go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to talk about what they've gotten thus far from this diagram, and whatever questions that they may have for Shrikant. I'm not an expert in Jung, but I can definitely, I'll try and relay everything that you say. So first up, let me see. We have, is it Miho?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I just used the first 2 letters of my first and last name. It's Mike. How are you?
Okay. Okay. So all right. So how you doing, Mike? Questions or comments?
I guess questions. So I in the meetup we had a cognitive profile understanding. I'm just trying to figure out. So I'm looking kind of at the I guess the just kind of what I got my results, and I'm wondering where they kind of fit into this diagram. I'm kind of looking at there's like extroverted thinking, TI introverted thinking, extroverted feelings, and then there's like kind of like a little bit of a summary mesh. I guess this is my Myers-Briggs.
Sure. So do you actually have a type that you were given?
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, then maybe Shrikant might actually, depending on timing and everybody else's questions, might actually be able to use you as an example as to how that test actually works into this model.
Sure. So it says, let's see, by focusing on the strongest configuration of cognitive processes, your pattern of responses most closely match individuals to ISFP.
Okay.
ISFP.
Okay, so that's Mike. All right. I'm going to leave it up to Shrikant as to whether he wants to map an individual per se, but I think that having an individual and an example would be very beneficial for everyone. So hopefully he'll be able to do that.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
thank you
Thank you
for your
so much.
contribution.
Yeah,
So,
of course. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
no problem. So next up we have is it VJ?
Just he just mentioned something about a continuing meetup after this. So I'd appreciate if you can provide that link on the chat for us to join in. I think he's just given snippets of the topic, so I don't have any real questions on the diagram at the moment.
Sure, you can actually just go. I will, if somebody actually could go ahead and put that in the chat, I will put it in the chat when I have a moment. But that is on the Eucharist in the Gospel of John. And that will be starting at 9 o'clock. So thank you.
I can do it, Joe.
All right, thank you, Avanique. So after that, we have, I see, Vijay, you have two different questions. I'm assuming that was the same one.
Yes, it is. By mistake, I put in that. So over to the next person. Thanks.
Sure. Brian.
There were several references to the scribal tradition or scribal method, and I've kind of lost touch with exactly what he means there. And then his source for this scribal tradition, is there a book or an author that we could look to understand what Shrikant means by scribal?
Okay.
He did say, that it's focusing on integration.
Yes.
But beyond that, is there anything we could look at to understand better this scribal tradition?
We had a video, a Comprehensivist Wednesday meetup, where we did cover the scribal traditions. And I don't know how long ago that was. That might have been 2 or 3 months ago, where he went through the different types of ages that we've actually, scribal age, the electric age, and all the different time periods. That would be one place, but we can bring that up to him to have him explain that in greater detail as well. So next up we have Judy.
I have a couple of comments or
Sure.
questions. One of them is with Jung and the other one is with Jordan Peterson. I don't know that much about, I'll start with Jordan Peterson. I don't know that much about Jordan Peterson. I was just wondering if Living Ideas or Meetup has any recommendations so I can catch up with his philosophy and his ideas. What does he stand for? The second one is, so I would like a little bit more information on him. The second one is about Jung. And did he ever mention the word censure? That's what I want to know. Like, how did he talk about what he was talking about, the censure? I have no idea. I've read a lot of Jung. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Jung. But I would like to know a little bit more about the process that he used to enter in and out. What we've been talking about, like entering the center, leaving the center, all that. So I don't know if Jung talked about that at all.
So I believe that when you're saying the center, it would probably be referring to the individuation process.
I don't know.
And so that is not something that I'm as well
Yeah.
versed in as Shrikant. But
Yeah.
we can ask him about that. Regarding
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson,
Uh-huh.
we've done maybe, I have no idea actually, maybe close to 70 meetups on Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
So, and include actually probably more than that, all things considered. And he is a Jungian psychologist, but he's also, he covers a wide variety of topics about self-improvement and self-realization. So we actually, as an exercise yesterday, mapped his 12 rules into this diagram. So just the 12 rules for order. And so we've gone through that process. That may be something that that Shrikant may or may not want to do this evening, but I'm thinking, because we have a limited number of time, you can also find out, there's a whole lot out there. I would recommend our videos on Jordan Peterson, but he has a lot of videos out there as well. So,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or?
Can I add something?
Please.
This Myers-Briggs, I'm certified Myers-Briggs. I did it a lot for team building. I remember getting a little bit involved in Jung then when I started doing Myers-Briggs, but although Myers-Briggs doesn't even mention Carl Jung just at the beginning when they give you the overview. But he never did the last part, the last part of the Myers-Briggs. That was some students that he had called Myers and Briggs, that they put together. The last part, which is the perception and the judging part. So it's actually only the first three that Jung was concerned with. I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you for sharing that too. Yeah, because Myers-Briggs doesn't capture quite as much as what Jung actually was covering.
No.
So that's a very important point. And when Shrikant was actually talking about this, he was actually talking about this as looking at it from the whole. So, and that would include everything from Jordan, from essentially Carl Jung, which was a little bit much more deeper than just the Myers-Briggs test.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Mike S., nice to see you again.
Fancy meeting you here 3 times in one day.
That's right.
When this first got presented, there was this guy, Tom Gilb, explained how to use this kind of chart. And he said, if you want to go someplace with this chart, you got to figure out where you're going and come up with a multi-criteria objective function of what your objective is. And then you can figure out how to use it. This particular chart is a classifier chart, which is a little different than the radar chart that he started with, or the star chart that he started with. And they both have uses, and they both have different formats with the, and it depends on what you want to get out of this chart as to what you want to do. You can look up categorization theory or classifier theory, and how. But in order to make it work, you got, and he's written some books on that subject. Yeah,
well,
he showed up at one of these.
It'll be interesting to see. We can actually put that in the form of a question, if you could.
Okay, how do you convert that chart to categorizing theory? This is the kind of question you want, though, right?
No, I mean, yes, I think that categories start to break things up and make them essentially, you start to ignore some of the other parts of the model itself.
Right, well,
So,
suppose you find a leaf of a tree and you want to find out what kind of tree it is and when that leaf fell off. So you have different kinds of categories that you could put it in, and then you score each one to decide where that came from. So suppose you want to find somebody who's, you want to decide which of these factors are active in a particular kind of behavior. So what do? You have to come up, one way of doing it is to come up with a questionnaire.
but
On the
I think
question, score
I
it that way.
so I think what would be what your suggesting actually falls mostly on the periphery, not necessarily on the core itself. So everything you're talking about by assigning a number or a value to something is related more to a task or a thought or an expression or an action. It doesn't necessarily get to what it means, what's the essence of that action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like Alice in Wonderland. She came to a crossroad and they said, what do you do with this sign? Which road should I take?
Take it, yeah.
And it depends. The Cheshire Cat said it depends on where you want to go with this, and that's what Tom Gilp said.
Well, we can actually have, in a way, I don't know if Shrikant will address that this evening, but we will, because we're kind of focusing on Jung. So maybe or maybe not, I'll bring up the question to him. So are there any other questions or comments regarding the model?
Hi, I have a question. Did you all design this model, or is it, where does it come from?
So this has been done through many iterations from Shrikant. I can remember when he started with a 4-factor model in 2020. And it incorporated some of these things, but this is a much deeper model where it captures, it was kind of built after studying various works, religious works specifically.
Well, it's very beautiful. I think I can see, because I've attended some sessions and I didn't understand what he was saying, the center and the peripheral, but now I'm glad I can see it.
This is the visual
It's
version of
very
that.
beautiful.
Yes, this is the visual version of that. And no, he's done a very good job. And actually just the wording inside of it is taken a great deal of work as well. So I see, Kevin, you have a question or comment.
Hi, Joe. Good evening. My question about the color choice. Primary color is blue, red, and the yellow. Why it's if would it be better switch the yellow and green? Or it's kind of according to the color series. Thank you.
Well, I believe the colors are actually based on Jung. Katie.
The only question I'd have for Shrikant would be thoughts, tasks, actions, your interactions with other people and feelings all seem under, the individuals or, if you're in a group, a group process, but expression seems like something external, like a work of art. So maybe he can clarify on that. How?
So can you clarify on expressions?
Yeah.
Because the others are externals versus internal.
Yeah.
All right. Because it's more of an internal process. Okay. Any other?
Hi, Joe, I'm back.
Oh, okay.
All right. So can you and Evanik just summarize the questions or comments?
Yeah, actually, we don't have that many. We do have
Just whatever
So
you can do in a minute, whatever you can summarize.
sure, I think one good one person asked, Mike asked if we could map the his cognitive profile onto this diagram as an example.
I will do one cognitive profile for sure.
So okay, his is IS.
No.
Okay.
That I'm not taking individual responsibility.
Okay.
I'll do one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and Brian asked about for you to expand upon what you mean by scribal method. Is there anything that you can refer us to as far as reading
Sure.
is concerned? You
Absolutely.
know,
Absolutely.
so, and I know you did a meetup on that,
Yes.
so we can cover that. Judy asked about Jordan Peterson. And so I referred her to our playlist, but if you can summarize what he really is all about, and what does Jung's center look like in this diagram?
Wonderful. So scribal, Jordan Peterson, mapping, and center. Okay.
For Carl Jung. And then Mike asked about categorization theory, which I think is a little bit maybe off topic.
Yeah, it's off.
Okay.
Very good. Evanik, would you like to add anything to into the summary?
Yeah, Joe did talk about this a little bit, but Ellis asked, how did you design the model? And that it helped her see the center versus the periphery better. And Kevin asked about the color choice, blue, red. And would it be better as yellow, green? Joe did explain that it was probably based on Jung. And then Katie had the question about thoughts, tasks, and actions, and particularly expression. It seems like it's external, and she wanted to know about the external versus the internal.
Sure, wonderful. So all the things about color choice and about the individual ones we're going to do later when we go into the psychological functions. About mapping, I'm going to map one profile, one of the things as an example. In terms of scribal, basically the scribal is the same as the best way to Brian to understand scribal is what is the thing that is common to Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Bible. That's the way to look at it. But there is explicit work on scribal that we've done with the meetups that we've done along with the Center for the Study of Digital Life. But we'll come back to these questions. The next one is about color choice. Again, that I will do because we're not dealing with colors yet. We're going to do that during the discussion on psychological functions. And center of that, the concept of center for Jung, I'm going to describe right now. That is my illustration from the 7 Sermons to the Dead. It's the best description in words that I have ever seen from Jung. Jordan Peterson is a Jungian. His core ideas come from Jung. His masterpiece is Maps of Meaning, which is based on the work of Jung. So there is a deep connection between that. So that's what I would say in terms of Jordan Peterson and Jung. And Jung is far deeper than Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is far more articulate than Jung. So it's easier to understand Jung through Jordan Peterson, but Jung has far greater depth. And I don't think either Jung or Jordan Peterson would object to either of those observations. So that's a very quick and fantastic points. So let me continue. Sorry about the interruption. I had to take this call, business call. All right. Now we are going to look at one work by Carl Jung. If you have not read it, and even if you have read it, please read it. It's called The 7 Sermons to the Dead. It's the shortest work, and I think the only artistic work of Jung. This is the power of art, where he's trying, you can end up capturing a lot more in just a few pages. If you listen to it, I listened to it twice today. It takes only 40 minutes to listen to the whole thing. If you go to YouTube and search for 7 Sermons to the Dead, there are a couple of recordings that you can listen to. What I'm speaking about is in the first 3 sermons. The last 4 sermons bring in points which are even more complex than this. But right now I'm going to keep it very simple. 7 Sermons to the Dead starts with describing a concept which Jung calls plumora. Plumora is the same as the Tao that we've been talking about. It is basically that. Give me just a second here. It is, he starts by saying, plumora can't be defined. You cannot really talk about it. It is there everywhere. It shapes everything, but you can't really name it. It's the same thing as Brahma, which is universal principle and all its manifestations in one. It is everything and the center at the same time. So this whole thing that we are looking at is plumora. Okay, it's the same as the center and everything. So it's the same concept as Brahma, Tao. That's what he's referring to. God, which contains everything, of which everything else was made. So it's that. I mean, I think, but it's most closely links to the Tao and Bhagavad Gita, the concept of Brahma and concept of Tao. So he says there is plumora, but you can see he's talking about the center. That's what the sermon starts with, and then says that then there are 2 deities, 2 gods. One is God the Son, that is Jesus. That is this at the core. You see, okay, sorry, I'm pointing to the wrong. This one right here, this center right here, that is Jesus. That is the ideal. That is the manifestation. It is Krishna. It is the manifestation of the infinite in a person. So it is 100% God, 100% man, just like Krishna. So that's a God on earth. And he says that there is darkness. So that is all of this over here. And that he calls the devil. So again, remembering outwitting the devil, all he needs you to do is to drift. It is this drift. So he's saying that there is this kind of attractive force over here of drifting, where you just want to pluck the fruit from the tree and just eat it without doing anything to keep the tree alive. It is focused on the results and getting attached to the results. So those are the 2. So there is plumora, which is the Tao. There is the sun, which is the center here. And then there is the devil, which is the darkness, the tendency to move away from the center, turning your back on the center, on truth, on goodness. But the most amazing idea that he has, so you can see that this is how it maps, his core ideas. This is the deepest things that he has spoken of. This is his way of talking about the Red Book diagrams in an explicit form, which I've not seen done so powerfully anywhere else. I'm sure he's covered it in parts, but this is really incredible formulation. I was blown away by the fact that you see this hexagon that we use, the Radiant Hexagon. He says that is the 4th thing. And you can call it life. So this is life, which is continuously it is driven from the light. The God here, the sun, is the light. So it is driven from life and it keeps returning to life. So this is you living that hexagon. And he calls it abraxas, is what he calls it. So that is abraxas. So you have those things. Okay, and that is life, and that is the hexagon. So he actually has exactly the same content. And the way he describes this abraxas, this radiant hexagon, is that he's saying that is life. So this one is light. So this is light. Plumora is basically everything. This entire diagram is plumora. The center is the sun. That is the way in which you see the idea, the way in which you see the truth, the beacon. Then there is the darkness, devil, which is you. When you stop doing the right thing, you just drift into it. And the most complex one is life itself, which is this hexagon. And what is the nature of life? Nature of life is that you are aware of good and evil. You are aware that you can go this way or this way. And you are at the knife's edge. You live at the knife's edge. Each moment you're choosing to go this way or this way. And each time you have consequence. Either you go away from the center or towards the center. But you still remain separate. He's saying that the abraxas is distinct. It has an identity. See, life is an identity. It has a being. It is not a thought. It is a being. Your life, you are a being. And you have to strive after your own being. So you have to be yourself. You have to understand yourself. The purpose, again, it's just incredible how beautiful this thing is. He's saying there are so many different contraries. I'm using the word contraries from Aquinas. So contraries means they're not contradictories. They're not opposites of each other, but they're contraries like yin yang. They're different from each other, but both of them, the play between both of them is actually needed for life. So these two directions are real. There is the good and the evil, and you're capable of both of them. At any point of time, you can rest on your laurels and you can start drifting. You can do that deliberately by turning your back on truth and evading and lying. But he's making another point. He's saying that any part, if you, for example, identify yourself with your thoughts, then what happens that you are actually violating your identity. You are this whole being. There is a wholeness to you. If you take a part of you and forget the wholeness, you will violate your being. You have to always keep in mind. So you have to do two things. You have to make distinctions of saying, what am I right now? And honestly identify it. He says, why should I do that? The person, the dead people ask him, why should I do that? Why should I do this distinguishing? Well, he says, you have an identity. If you don't distinguish yourself from not yourself, so that is basically keeping the identity of that of your life, no matter where it is. So you have to know where you are on everything, and you say, okay, this is my identity, this is where I am right now. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you can become better or you can become worse. You have to keep in mind that as well. He says, if you identify yourself with a part, then you lose the whole. This is my point about saying that there is, in the scribal functioning, there is an integration between these things. If in the process of trying to understand any one of these things, you lose the integration between all of them, then you're identifying yourself with a part. You are undercutting the whole or undercutting your being, and that's going to be destructive. It is equivalent to killing yourself, equivalent to destroying your own nature, because your nature is whole. So what this point is, the point I'm making right now, is the integration has to be total, circular, like this. Okay. So far I'm made 2 points. One is the radial nature of things, and second is the circular integration. Now, let me see how we're doing on time. We're running a little bit behind. So let me show you the way in which the different scribal traditions, in this case, specifically Jung, does this integration. Okay, and I want to present archetypes as a way of doing that. Now, John Beebe, who is one of the amazing Jungian analysts, has done this integration between Jung's archetypes and Jung's psychological functions. So I'm resting a lot on that. We've got a video, which is the most popular video on our channel, by Richard Owen, talking about these functions. Joe, if you could put a link to that, Richard Owen's video, and that's something that I want everybody to see, because this it's really amazing presentation. It's the best presentation. And then John Beebe himself was in the audience, and then he talks about, he elaborates further on the model, but it's the best presentation on this 8-function model that is there. But I'm going to use a simplified version of it now. Now I'm taking it in a different order. See, I'm not describing the functions first. I'm showing you how the functions have to be integrated first. Okay, because I'm saying that the radial, basically I'm saying integration is more important than differentiation. If you lose the integration, no matter what differentiation you do, it's going to be useless. So I'm focusing on integration. I'm presenting a tool of integration that Jung has used in all his work amazingly well. What happens is that we as human beings can think much better in terms of people. Jordan Peterson makes this point. Like, you can think of yourself as having kind of multiple people within you, of saying, oh, this is my advisor. Now this is my advisor voice telling me something. And that's a very powerful way of thinking. So archetypes is a tool of that kind. So let's take, so I'm now presenting some aspects. These two are the axes that Jung uses. The vertical axis is what is called the perceptual axis. So that is S and N here. And the horizontal axis is what is called the judgment axis. This is T here and F here. Okay. So now let's look at a person who is an artist. Okay. Let's say the strongest function for them, the strongest thing that he's able to do is to create art, to express himself beautifully. Okay, so that function is right here. That is actually, this is NI. I will go into the details later on, but this is your ability of pulling together everything that you know to have a vision. And let's say that that's the best thing of all the things you can do. That's the thing that you can do best. That's the thing that you're strongest at. That's the thing that you have spent most time doing. That's the thing that you enjoy doing. That's the thing when you do, it gives you more energy. So various ways of describing what is called the dominant function. Now, think of them. I'm going to use two different ways of describing this. So think of, so this one, we will call it the dominant function. We are going to call it the hero function. That's your hero. That's your go-to thing. That one is the most powerful thing you've got going within you. Okay. So I'm going to do it in two parallel. So I'm going to use the concepts of Carl Jung, and then I'm going to give a modern version, which is a car. This is the driver of your car. Okay, this is the driver. This is actually taking you places. All right. Now, that can be supported by another function. So that one, let us call it the father function. So now imagine this is like a loving father who is the consultant, who is giving you advice as you need it. You're doing things most of the time, but whenever you need guidance, whenever you need navigation, you're using this function. So this function is FE over here. All right, so you have these two functions, your hero function, which is doing most of the work, your second function, which is called the secondary function, that is guiding it. Okay. Now there is a third function. Now this third function is like a child. Okay, so right over here. So this is dominant function. Okay, that's the first function. This is the second function. And this is the third function. This is secondary function, let's say. And this is tertiary function. This is the third function. So this one I'm going to call the child function. So the nature of this, the third function, is actually very interesting. Is that it is not very well developed, but you love it very much. You delight in it, you take pleasure in it. And you try to do it whenever you can. You're not as good at it as you are with your hero function, but it's your child, it's your growth potential. When you're younger, that function is typically much weaker. As you grow older, you actually, because you love it so much, you end up making it grow. So it changes over time. Okay, so this one is, let me just rub this away. This is the third function. So I'll just number it, so that's easier. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this function is TI. Okay, so I'm describing a particular type. All right, so the child is, imagine this, there is this like 3-year-old child sitting in the back seat. Okay, you're paying attention to it. It is making all kinds of nice sounds. Always, children make such delightful sounds, and you love it, but you're not really focused on it. But it is learning on its own. You like it very much. Your trip is much better because it's around. Okay. So that's the fourth function. All right. Now, that's the third function. There is a fourth function, which BB calls the anima. Let's make it simple. You can call it the spouse. Basically, this is a function which completes you. You don't have it. You're not particularly strong, but whenever you have some of it, it really supports you. It really completes you. Okay, that's called the anima function or animus function. Now, this one in this case is going to be SE. Okay, so now what I want you to do, so this is like your spouse sitting in the chair. So you can imagine like child sitting right behind you as a driver and your spouse sitting diagonally over there. You know, you're glad that it is there. It's going to, you know, she really is adding to your life. You kind of depend on her in many cases. It's very different from you. So now step back a moment. So I've described it in two ways. One, I've described it as a placing in a car. Second, I'm describing it in a family. So remember, this is a family. Okay, you love your family. All these are yours. Okay, these are not, you are not just this. If you said you were just this, you would not be able to live. You would certainly be undercutting yourself terribly. If you said you were just this and this, you'd still be undercutting yourself. So you need to have an approach towards these functions like you have towards your family. That is the principle of integration. They are all very different. They have different roles to play. They have different strengths, different abilities. They have different dynamics between them, but you need all of them in order to have a good trip, a good life. You need all of them. Okay, so that is the idea of integration using the archetypes. The thing I'm stressing is the idea of saying, don't look at just individual functions, look at all your functions. So far, I've discussed only 4 functions. There are other 4 functions that we can go into, but I want to make sure that this is understandable. So let me see if I have to make, I think this is what I wanted to tell you briefly about the functions here. So this side is feeling, this side is thinking. This one down here is FE. This is basically based on the love of the people that you love, like you're wanting the best for them, you're feeling for them, you're being aware of how they're feeling, you're using that as an important thing in your life. This one is your inner feeling. This is your devotion to your own potential. This is your sense of whether something matches with the core of your values. This one is TI. This one is TE. This is application of thinking to the external world. This is your ability to plan. This is your ability to organize complex things. I have compressed in the way in which I found that these axes, the horizontal one, this one, and this one are the judgment axis. I find that the nature of this perceptual axis is different. So the way I'm representing those is NI is here inside and NE is here. NE is NI, as I've described before, is your ability of bringing everything together, of seeing the patterns to arrive at some uniform things. For example, this diagram is a result of NI. NI is the primary function that is being used to produce this diagram. This is a vision. This is bringing together of many things. This is in the realm of art. This is in the realm of expression. This is designed to be beautiful, that, you know, achieves so many things at once. So that's what NI is like. NE is seeing possibilities in the world. You say, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that, maybe we can do this. So it's a way of going into the unknown and trying to come up with things that would be useful. So these two functions, I mean, if I wanted to continue the analogy of archetypes, this is like your brother. Okay, it's like the other side. So for example, the way in which I experience, I'm very strong on both NI and NE. So I'm going back and forth between them all the time. And they actually work very beautifully together. They are pointed in exactly opposite direction. One of them goes out and collects as many things that may be of interest, and the other one puts it together. So in a sense, they are opposing, because one is trying to put things together and one is trying to expand, but they actually respect each other like brothers do, though they may fight with each other. Okay, and on a particular thing, they will have all kinds of disagreements. So this is like your brother function, which is going out looking for things, but you are glad that he did, because that's going to be the source of the new insights that you're going to have. You wouldn't be able to do that without him. Similarly, if that brother knows how much he will actually there will be tension because they are opposing things. But he knows that without you putting things together, he will not know where to go next. So your NI is necessary for him. So it's like there is that dependence between them, but you can see how organic these relations are. Okay. Similarly here, SE is the one inside here, and SI I put here. S is about sensory, actual physical action. I put SI outside is because it is memory of the past. It is something that has worked for you in the past, and that is being brought back, whereas SE is your action in the present. So that is the active thing inside your life. So that's his inside. And again, those have the same kind of yin-yang relationship. You want to have those memories, but you want to be ready to override them and do the right thing whenever they're not matching. You wouldn't be able to function well without the memories. And the memories, the person who is, again, it's the brother relationship over there between those two functions. This is, I'm now defining it in terms of the functions, but the secondary things about the about 2- or 3-, the other function, like, see, this is 1, and then NE would be like 1-. That's a little bit complicated. So I want to first make sure that people get this point about the archetypes and see, I will take all kinds of questions about it, and then we will open it up further to go further. So I just want to now, I would love to know where everybody is, whether any, what questions you have. Try to ask it as questions and try to keep them brief, because I want to try to go through as much as we possibly can. So go ahead and type exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom if you would like to ask a question or give any comment on what was said so far. Again, be brief, raise your hand in order to speak, keep on topic, be brief, And feel free to disagree with anybody or absolutely with me. Please disagree if you would like, and do so courteously. All right, so next up is Alice. Alice, go ahead.
Hi, I've never had that explained so nice, because whenever I read about personality online, it's like very test tube and I don't get it. And you're explaining it like a family. So I don't know, when you have time, maybe you could do a quick F, I, F, E, and I think you didn't do the TI one.
Sure.
And TE.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will go through
when
that.
you have a chance.
Thank you. Thank you. So firstly, thank you for the compliment. Appreciate that. That is what is different about this. Like the Jungian way of looking at it is far more integrated. This is very much Jungian. I'm not doing anything in tradition, which is not Jungian. Most MBTI people look at it in a, they are not, like 90% of the people in MBTI are not really Jungian. But people who are Jungian in MBTI actually can use these things. Like John Beebe is a great example. I'm trying to give a quick overview here. The link that Joe has put in the chat has a very detailed description of all the functions, all the archetypes, how they work together, all the dynamics. So that's a very detailed one. I will go into details of the TI and other ones as well. But please, I would like to hear from more people of what they got, and we'll go from there. So next up is Evanique.
Yeah, I just have a clarification question.
Sure.
So are the archetypes the hero, the child, the father? Oh, I'm sorry, the father, the child, the spouse, and can't read the fourth one too well.
It's hero. That's number one. Number two is father. Number three is child, and number four is spouse.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments? Any questions? Joe.
This is making it much more clear for me. But there are ideas that I'm kind of missing with the idea of the ego, the self, the soul, and all of those, like how they fit into this diagram as well.
Sure. I mean, I'm not, what I'm doing is that I'm not trying to cover all the ideas.
Okay.
So what I've chosen to do with Jung is that I'm covering three ideas. One is his ideas of the center and periphery kind of ideas, which is the core to this diagram. I'm mapping those ideas. Second, I'm talking about his idea of self and individuation, and the fact that the self is the whole and individuation is the process of discovering that whole. Ego is getting hung up on the parts and regarding that as a self. What was the other thing? So ego is just that. It's like you are holding on to some pieces and you're saying that is myself, which it is not. Or, whatever you happen to be conscious of, that is what ego is. What was the other one that you wanted?
The self, ego, the soul. I mean, it was just another level.
Soul is not an idea that he uses much.
Okay. And so okay.
Ahead.
No, that's fine.
The idea that he uses a lot is persona, which is how people try to portray themselves to others. So what you have is self is the whole. The whole of this is the self, and you're in the process of discovering it. Ego is your idea of your limited idea of what you are, based on whatever it is that is conscious and habitual for you. Persona is even worse, because so it's like ego plus you're trying to deceive other people by pretending to be something else. And so it's like that. Go ahead.
But but aren't they like the idea of ego, aren't they linked to archetypes specifically? In a way?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are linked is a very,
Yeah,
it's a very
that's a
general
tough way.
word. I mean, you can, like, for example, self is an archetype. So there are many, many, many archetypes. I'm doing a very simplified version
Okay.
of the archetypes in order to show you how they actually function as integrating mechanisms of bringing things together.
A network, and this is very helpful in that regard. Very, very successful in that regard. I'm asking maybe questions that we can get to at a
I'll
later
be
date.
happy to kind of elaborate on
Okay.
it. Anybody else? Any questions? No questions? Okay, so let me go to next to the further elaboration here of colors. There were questions about colors. There was questions. Yeah, let's go to colors. So the colors I'm using here, the red, blue, and green are the colors that Jung has traditionally used. Red for feeling, blue for thought, and S for sensor, sensing functions or, physical actions. So those are the three primary colors. What my innovation here is that I'm using combination colors. One direction in which I'm expanding on Jung is that Jung's functions, like most of he's focused on psychological functions. What I've found is that these things combine together in a very interesting way. Like the feelings, let me bring up a new diagram. So the feelings and thoughts combine to produce art or expression. Like, for example, this thing that he wrote, like Red Book that Jung wrote, is art. Even this writing of 7 Sermons to the Dead, which, by the way, I recommend very highly to everybody, is a profound work of art. All of the books that we are reading, like Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, are works of art. They are expressions of the mind fully charging the emotions. So that is the art. And when you combine the color, the light, which is blue, and light, which is red, you get magenta. Similarly, I'm saying that the green, the body actions, when you combine it with the heart, you get the area of interactions with other people. And there the virtue is love. So the closest function that Jung has for it is FE. This is pure emotion, internal emotion. The closest function that Jung has for that is FI. The thinking, it's mostly, this is deductive function thinking that is happening inside your head, trying to achieve consistency between things, that is TI. And then this is TE. This is again the new thing that I'm bringing in, which is about transforming the world through planning of action. So this is combination of action and thinking. And I think TE maps. So that's a cyan color, which is a combination of the color red, of green and blue. And all these combinations I'm talking about, the combination of light. So when you combine, it's kind of counterintuitive, but when you combine red light with green light, you get yellow. So I put the colors simply I've chosen the primary colors that Jung has because I think they speak to me. I think it captures the redness of emotions, the kind of calmness of the blue and thought, and greenness of kind of earthiness of the sensory action. I think those colors capture these natures well. Now so now I have 6 axes, 6 things, and Jung has 8. So how do I handle that? So what I found is that the judgment axis actually have a different nature than the perception axis. So perception axis is vertical, and there the beauty is mostly kind of NI. It's about doing visions. And here you're kind of trying out many things. That is exploration, which is what any function is about. Here, kind of disciplined action that you're taking is SE, actually doing physical action. And here is all the remembered things that you have. So that those are the functions that are there. And the various, so tertiary things I have are art, friends and family, and economy. All of these things are things that you do outside of yourself using the functions. And what I find is that when you try to map yourself in this way, so I don't use the Jungian functions anymore. I simply say, how good am I at art? How good am I at the love I have for my friends and family? Or how good am I at disciplined action? You can see that there are all these virtues through which I'm measuring things. Let's see. All right. Any questions? Let's see how we're doing on time. We're about 8:34. Okay. Any questions? So I can take, let's see, does anybody want me to try out this for any other type? Maritza, do you want me to do look at this? Okay, there was one hand up. Give me a second here. Judy, go ahead. Oh, just a second. I have to unmute everybody. Hold on. Go ahead. So
Hi.
and then Melissa.
Okay. I just love what you're doing with the Jungian approach to feelings and thinking, and it just woke up something within me that I had maybe forgotten for many years, which is the Myers-Briggs typology. I did the Myers-Briggs. I am a certified Myers-Briggs trainer, and I did it for team teachings and all kinds of things. And we used, but we used, instead of the I and E, we use extrovert and introvert. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
So what I've done is that I find that I've always found that using Jung's functions directly is far more powerful than using just the 4 letters of Myers-Briggs. The 4 letters of Myers-Briggs actually are just simply derived from Jung's functions. So for example, the diagram that I did was for a type INFJ. So this is for INFJ. So NI is the first function, and the second function is FE. So I find that looking at it this way, you're saying, what functions are you actually using? That, for example, here you're saying that NI is my first function. So I'm trying to form visions, and I'm guiding it by a social vision. That's what I'm doing. think that's far more powerful than using the 4 letters. So I would recommend doing that. I have a test. Joe, can you find the test, the keys to cognition, and put it in the chat? It's there on the meetup page too. I would
Sure.
recommend folks that you take that test, because what it does is that it will give you the scores on each of your functions. And you will notice some things, like each person is actually very different from each other. Like all INFJs, for example, there is tremendous variation within them. And you can see them, you can see that variation moment you start measuring all functions instead of just one. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. I would say try to use the Jungian functions. Then what I have here is that I'm finding that having this separated out, because Jung was mostly focused on inner functions and he described it from an inner perspective. The way I have described it is that these primary functions, primary things that I have, these 3 colors, just a second, these 3 colors, those are internal, but these other 3 colors are external. And I think it gives a better way of making sense of yourself. So I would recommend trying out this. Okay, next up is going to be Maritza, Katie, Connie, and Allison. Maritza.
So, I've been quiet here because I'm processing. It's a lot. Looking at it here, the functions of Jung, I have a hard time with the, so you have hero, child, you have father and spouse. It feels incomplete. Like you're not accounting for the other 2 squares there. There's 6 of them. So what are we missing there?
Sure. Okay. So I'll give you that. And folks, I would recommend watching that video that Joe posted from Richard Owens, because he puts that, fully. So I've looked at only 4 functions. So let me look at the remaining 4. When you look at, let's see here, look at this. Okay, so there is a hero function here, right? There is I call it the brother function over here, which is like NE and I. It's like, for me, it's like breathing in and breathing out. It's like, it's the other side of the same function. It's with a different orientation. BB calls it the opposing force. For the second function, which is the father function, this is like the loving father. You can have a function over here, that is FI, which is called Senex. This is like a criticizing father or criticizing mother who keeps telling you, oh, you're doing everything wrong. Okay, it's that kind of a function. Then for the third one, here you have a child. This is a very well-behaved child, okay, whom you love. Here, there is a child called trickster. Okay, so that's the function over here. And here, like here, I have the spouse. The other side of it is demon, of things that you trip up on all the time. So those are the remaining 4 functions. Go ahead, Marisa.
I have one more question. So I also have a hard time with the child being in the block of wisdom. That would seem backwards to me.
No, that is just accident of the particular type I chose to portray. I chose to portray INFJ. So the thought axis is TI. So the third function of INFJ is TI. That's why the child is there. So for example, it was INTP. All these hero child, they would be in a different place. So if you want, I can go ahead and chart all of those.
Also, these move around, it's not static.
It's not static because it depends on the hero function is your dominant function. So depending on what you are, the dominant function is going to be different.
I see.
And the places where the relative, like it will be like the relative positions would be the same, but the hero could start, like, for example, let's take INTP, right? If you take INTP, the hero is right here. The TI is the first function. And the next function is NE. So this is the father function. The next function, NE, opposite of that is SI. So that is the child function. And the spouse function, this one is TI. So FE would be the spouse function. So these move around based on what your type is. And you would have like different things, like actually the most fascinating thing is to actually try to work out for your own functions, and you will see like the strengths of each of them. So typically, for example, if you're INTP, you will have that your TI would be very high, your NE would be very high, and you would notice that your SI is pretty high too. And your weakest function is likely to be like FI or something like that. So there is like when you use the test, the keys to cognition test, what things you're weak at will point to your strengths. So it's very interesting of how these things work together. What is the dynamic between them? You can begin to see. And that is at a completely different level than what MBTI does. This is far deeper. Kind of, this is like looking at like energetics of different functions and how they interact with one another. And the archetypes are being used as tools for figuring out that interaction. So it is very, very deep. It's like thinking like, okay, so it's like taking what you do and kind of personifying it and thinking of them that way, and you can see them as interacting with one another. And actually it works pretty well. When I got interested in MBTI, I started doing meetups in New York. I would get between 60 to 80 people show up, and then I would divide them into 4 different groups, 4 different times. It would be like 16 different combinations. And we would do all kinds of tests, like saying, okay, let's say put all FEs together. Let's see what happens when they have FE as a primary function, but their secondary function could be this or that. Right? So it's like doing all kinds of combinations and seeing what the interactions are, then people talking about what the experience was. So there is a lot of stuff here, which is quite extensive. And I don't think it is particularly well understood. Can we go? Okay, next up is going to be Katie, Connie, and Allison. Katie.
I'm curious here, how do you judge whether you're, I'm seeing the thoughts to the expressions of art. I'm curious how like intentionality, this is a beautiful drawing, but what if you thought it was beautiful, and someone created something they thought that was, who's the judge of, like, how does intentionality, and who judges whether one's drifting or
each person has to judge it. And if you're not a good judge, you're going to suffer. So you have to judge. There is no, it has to come from within you. That's definitely all of, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, Bible, all of them say, you have to ask in order to receive. So it is, it is internal. At the same time, there is objective reality. So there is objective reality, but you have to acknowledge the truth. You have to pursue the truth, and you can choose not to pursue the truth. So I would put it that way. And in terms of beauty or anything, like what do you think is devotion? Who decides what wisdom is? Who decides what prudence is? Who decides what love is? Each of us independently does that. We have to be aware of all of this, and we have to try to do our best. But there is an objective reality, and you sometimes get it, sometimes you don't get it. So you have to be very aware of the fact that there are a lot of things that you don't know, and you have to be prepared to deal with that. Next up is Connie, followed by Allison and Joe. Connie.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to take the test myself or read the John BB-8 function. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. So I think this is gonna be answered then. But the Myers-Briggs, I think I took 100 years ago. Isn't that what they give you in school to see what direction your strengths are to take classes type thing?
Yep.
So the Jungian, what is the, purpose of me in my finding out my type? And again, I think it's going to be answered tomorrow when I read.
Exactly.
To know where my to know where my strengths are and what should I, or weak, if that's the terminology, how do I effectively use it to make myself understand myself more?
Absolutely. So firstly, I would say for everybody, this is what I would recommend. You take the test, then whatever kind of possible things are, actually, I'm going to do a follow-up meetup on Wednesday on this one, so you can come for that. You can go ahead, take the test, come back, whatever it says your likely to top possibilities are. You can watch videos by Michael Pierce. Michael Pierce has the best videos. He is the best person I've seen on MBTI simply, and the reason for that is that he's a Jungian. So he has the best descriptions of all the types, all the functions. So I would recommend watching them as a background. All right, next up is Allison, followed by Joe.
Yeah, so I've taken Myers-Briggs like probably 20 times in my life. And probably the last time was, I think, like 6 months ago. Every single time it was INFJ. But today, when I took the one that you gave me, it was ENFJ. And I don't know if it's because that test is.
Matter. I mean, what you do is that you just send me the results of the relative strength of all the functions, and we can talk about it. So what we'll do is that anybody who wants, on Wednesday, I will go through the results, because it's actually very interesting. You can tell why different tests give you different results. So it's like you're exceptional that you get mostly one result, but there are a whole bunch of people like me who get completely different results with every test I take. And this will explain why that is, because you will see the relative strengths and how, if the measurement was slightly off, you would be this type versus that type. So we'll go through all of that on Wednesday. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of gets to the point of my question, was that not only has my personality type changed over time, and Myers-Briggs tests have changed over time as well. But I guess the idea of then, how do you then define like progress? I guess you're always searching towards the center, right? You just, but how do you reconcile all the different results?
Firstly, I would say don't look at the test for looking at progress. These tests, the level of acuity of them is horrible. All tests are bad. Okay. So you have to use your internal guidance that is far more dependable than all of these tests. So you can't use tests to chart your progress. Impossible. So don't do it. Secondly, what I would say is that always don't look at all the functions. Look at what functions you're strong at. Then use like what I had is that so when somebody came to me, because I had all these like hundreds of people who come through the meetups on MBTI. So I would recommend following things. Number one, take this cognitive test. Okay. Number two, see which of those functions are possible. I'll show you how to do the function pairs, so you can see what are the possible things for you. Then use like an internal mechanism to figure out which ones seem impossible to you, and then come up with like a list of 3 or 4 things, and then watch Michael Pierce videos of the descriptions of them, and to see if they actually match you or not. Okay. Then whenever you're using it, always focus on cognitive functions. Never focus on the four-letter words. Don't use 4-letter words for other people or for yourself. Okay, it's a bad thing to be using 4-letter words like that. Okay, so use cognitive functions. Those are causative. Those are causative. They give you a much more nuanced understanding. Use your own judgment. Use kind of like a gestalt of what each of the functions are, gestalt of what each of the type is, using Michael Pierce's videos, because otherwise you're not going to get it. You're not going to understand what FE is until you watch Michael Pierce's video on FE. You don't know what INFJ is. He has this 15-minute beautiful video which will explain like all kinds of things. And if you're an INFJ, you will say, yes, that is just me. And the other thing, you'll look at ENFJ and say, that's not me at all. Or you can say, oh, there are some elements here that match. Oh, I can see why it is there. So you need to do all of that stuff in order for it to be useful. Okay, let's do one thing. It's 8:53. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a follow-up meetup on MBTI, psychological functions. So please take the test. Please watch Michael Pierce's videos on any functions that are your primary functions or secondary functions. Please watch Michael Pierce's videos on the first at least two types, and see if they match with what your view of yourself is. Always be skeptical about tests. Rely on yourself. Don't rely on tests to figure out who you are. That's not going to work. And we will continue this discussion on Wednesday. All right. We are starting a new meetup soon. So let me go ahead and stop sharing here. Give me a second.
Just
okay. Go ahead.
Can I ask one really quick point of clarification? When you're talking about the Michael Pierce videos, are you talking about the ones that he did for us or his personal?
Just
Okay,
just
his
videos.
personal.
Yeah.
Okay, his online videos. Okay.
Right. Very good.